All right, we are going to continue on this theme of the future of AI. We're going to talk about the future of AI in education for our final session before lunch. And here to introduce the session is PAN IIT's 2024 conference co-chair Paulette Altmaier. Paulette?
Good morning. It is my very great pleasure today to introduce Sal Khan, who will be joining us from California. I came to know Sal personally when I spent 2 years at Khan Academy, so I can personally attest to the strength of his vision and his commitment. So Sal Khan is the founder and CEO of Khan Academy, a nonprofit educational organization that offers free online lessons in math, science, and humanities, as well as tools to track student progress. Khan Academy is piloting an AI guide called Khanmigo that is a tutor and a teaching assistant. The organization partners with more than 500 public school districts and schools across the US. Worldwide, Khan Academy has more than 150 million registered users in 190 countries, with free lessons available in more than 50 languages. So in closing, it's well known that Sal founded Khan Academy in his closet, and he still records all his videos there. So ladies and gentlemen, here's Sal from that very same world-famous closet.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Paulette, and it's so wonderful to see you. And Paulette was a great contributor to the Khan Academy mission over the years. What I thought would be helpful, and when we talked to the organizers, what we thought would be helpful is I'll give you a little bit of a background of how we are thinking about AI in education, and then really just open up as much time as we can for conversation. So many of y'all know that Khan Academy started with me tutoring cousins. My background was in tech. I found myself working in finance after business school, 2004. I just got married. I was in Boston at the time. And my family from New Orleans, that's where I was born and raised, was visiting me in Boston. My 12-year-old cousin Nadia just came out of conversation. She's having trouble with math. I offered to tutor her. She goes back. I start working with her. Slowly but surely, I deprogram her lack of confidence. She gets caught up with her class. She gets a little ahead of her class. At that point, I become what I call a tiger cousin. I call up her school. I say, I really think Nadia Rahman should be able to retake that placement exam from last year. They say, who are you? I say, I'm her cousin. And they let her. And that same cousin, with a little bit of intervention, with a little bit of help, went from being struggling with math and being, frankly, in a remedial math track to getting into an advanced math track. So I was hooked. I started tutoring her younger brothers. Word spreads in my family that free tutoring is going on. And so before I know it, I am tutoring 10, 15 cousins all over the country and family friends. And I saw a common pattern that, they needed more practice with certain concepts, they had gaps in their knowledge. And so that was the original Khan Academy. It had nothing to do with on-demand videos. It was software, web-based software that would give them as much practice and as they need to fill in those gaps. And it was really in 2006 that a friend suggested that I supplement that practice software. And this whole time I had a day job at a hedge fund, but a friend suggested that I supplement it with videos. And I thought that was a fairly low-tech thing to do, but I gave it a shot. And I think, as many of y'all know, the videos took on a life of their own. They were even more discoverable. And then by 2009, I frankly had trouble focusing on my day job. I set up Khan Academy as a not-for-profit, mission-free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And what I'm about to show you, I'm going to go into the presentation now. And so let me share my screen, share the desktop, share, and then let me go into presentation mode. And the reason why I show this, and some of y'all might have seen a TED Talk that I gave earlier in 2023. I was going to say earlier this year. And I start with this slide. And this is a slide that I did not know about when I started this journey tutoring my cousins. But it's much older than when I was tutoring my cousins. And it really, to some degree, defines what we've been trying to do at Khan Academy over the years. This is a famous paper that Benjamin Bloom, famous education psychologist, wrote in 1984. Two Sigma problem, the search for methods of group instruction as effective as one-to-one tutoring. And the punchline here is this traditional bell curve, this convention, that's what you typically see for students on a topic. And Benjamin Bloom, and people have debated since then, what is the actual effect size? How many standard deviations can you get? But broadly speaking, these results have been reinforced by, I believe, over 50 studies since then, that if you can give people one-to-one tutoring, give them that attention, unblock them when they need it, motivate them appropriately, you can get, and he argued, for at least the domain that he studied, a 2 standard deviation improvement. And I think everyone here knows that is a massive improvement. That takes a student in, say, the 50th percentile, puts them to the 96th percentile, takes in a below average student to above average student. And so what I was able to do with Nadia and some of my early cousins was essentially, and it frankly was a 2 standard deviation improvement. Nadia went from struggling with unit conversion in 7th grade to taking calculus before 8th grade. So dramatic improvement. And if you think about what Khan Academy has been doing now for the past almost 20 years, it's been trying to approximate what a great one-on-one tutor would do, but approximate it with the technologies that we had at the time, or that we still have at the time, on-demand video, personalized exercises, and also the humans in the room. Parents and teachers have a role in trying to approximate this tutor. If you're a teacher with 30 kids in a class, very hard to give them that one-on-one instruction. But if you have the help of a tool like Khan Academy and it informs you where the students are, maybe you can group students together by where they are. Maybe the students can support each other. You can do more focused interventions. So that's always been the dream. Let's get as close to that one-on-one tutoring as we can. Summer of 2022, which many of y'all will remember is about 5-6 months before ChatGPT comes out. Sam Altman, Greg Brockman reach out to us and say, hey, we're about to train our next generation model. We think it's going to surprise people. We think it might be interesting to work with Khan Academy. I was skeptical. I'd been following the various GPT 1, 2, and 3. It was fascinating, but I didn't think it was ready for prime time. But when we saw what was possible with eventually became GPT-4, we said, wow, this might take us that much further towards that right distribution. And in case you're wondering, that middle distribution mastery learning, that's what even in 1984, Benjamin Bloom theorized could be possible with technology if you let people learn at their own time and pace, if they haven't learned it yet, to have another shot at goal. So what I'll show you really fast is what we've been working on since then. And what we launched, as Paulette introduced, is called Khanmigo. We launched it in March of 2023. And I have to say, when ChatGPT came out in November of 2023, November 2022, I was really bummed. We were under an NDA with OpenAI. I Slack Greg Brockman. I'm like, what are y'all doing? You have us all lawyered up and quiet, and you just launched something. And they said, we haven't launched anything. We just put a chat interface on top of GPT 3.5, which was the last generation model, and the whole world exploded. And I was really bummed because we all remember, and it's still happening. Immediately, people said this is a cheating tool, it has no guardrails, it's hallucinating, has math errors. School systems started banning it. And I said, wow, people are going to start throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're doing all of this work. Are we going to be thrown into the same category? And we're putting guardrails on it. But the good news was, by March of 2023, when we launched alongside the same day as GPT-4, the system for the most part had come around. They realized that this technology had a place in education, but they said if only there were the right guardrails, if we could protect around cheating, if it could really empower learning, we could get really excited about it. And that's what Khanmigo is about. So I'll show that now. So this is a traditional exercise on Khan Academy. Based on the demographics of this audience, I'm assuming that many of your children are using Khan Academy, not just this audience, but yes, we have a high penetration in the South Asian community. But what's new here is Khanmigo here on the bottom right. And you'll see a few things. First is one of the guardrails. This conversation is recorded and viewable by your teacher, and actually parents can also see. The second guardrail, the student says, tell me the answer. It's not telling the answer. It's saying, hey, I'm here to help you learn. What do you think is the first step to solve this? And then if the student makes a common mistake, they're actually not distributing the 2 properly there. I know it's moving through this fast. It says, I see that you tried to simplify the equation, but I'm curious how you got to your step. can you explain your thought process? Remember, we need to distribute the -2 to both the 9 and the 2m inside the parentheses. Let's try that again. And I think for any of y'all who are familiar with the large language model space or have played with even things like GPT-4 or Gemini Ultra, you're probably surprised that I won't claim that Khanmigo is infallible at math, but we've put a lot of effort above and beyond the underlying model to make it much better at math, and in particular to make it much better at math tutoring. And so what you see here, this is the type of interaction. If I was chatting with Nadia back in 2004, I don't think I actually could have done much better than what Khanmigo is doing from a chat point of view. This is help with coding. And here the students trying to make the clouds part. They decrement one variable. They're like, why isn't the right cloud moving? Or why is only the left cloud moving? And it's pretty amazing how it can actually understand abstract concepts. Even though the clouds are defined as a bunch of ellipses here, it understands which ellipses are the right cloud. And it's, once again, not telling the answer, but it's saying, hey, maybe you want to decrement the right X variable as well. And I have to say, I've seen my own children do this. I have a CS degree, and it's a better tutor than I am because it's infinitely patient. And if you've ever had to debug someone else's code, you know it's not the most fun thing, but this immediately can give a response without giving too much away. Here's an example of a student watching a video, and as you can see, it has context of what the student's doing. It actually has memory of what the student is doing. We're introducing that more and more. But if the student asks the age-old question, why do I need to learn this? Well, it asks, well, what do you care about? And which is the right response, I think. I want to be a professional athlete. And so then it can take the context of whatever the student is learning. And now, as I mentioned, has memory. We have this thing called insights where it will now take notes and it will say, okay, this student wants to be a professional athlete. So in the future, if it asks for an example, maybe I'll angle it in that direction. But we make that transparent. That's another guardrail. We make that transparent to the student. Well, there's a place where they can see all of the insights that the AI has. It says, no, I don't want to be a professional athlete anymore. I want to be a doctor now, whatever it might be. The last guardrail, well, there's many other guardrails, but another one above and beyond it being viewable by parents and teachers, if the student does something that is shady, if they say, hey, I want to harm myself or harm others, or I want to talk about something inappropriate, we have a second AI moderating the conversation, and it will actively notify parents, administrators, and teachers to take a double check at that transcript. And it will also shut down that conversation so that the student can't engage in that anymore. Now, everything I've shown right now is, I would say, traditional tutoring. It's what I was doing, frankly, with my cousins. I'll now show you, frankly, things that most tutors will not be willing to do. This is a student talking to an AI simulation of a literary character. In this case, it's Eeyore the donkey. So, oh, hello there. It's me, Eeyore. Not that anyone would notice, but since you're here, what would you like to talk about? Just remember, I'm an AI simulation. And so the student is asking, why are you so pessimistic? And AI simulation of Eeyore says, well, now, isn't that a question? I suppose it's just my nature, you see. Some donkeys are born with a sunny disposition. Others, well, we see the thistles more than the roses. But that's life, isn't it? We can't all be Tiggers bouncing about. Now, what about you? Do you find yourself more of a Tigger or an Eeyore in your own, well, I didn't complete, in your own life? And as you can see, we put a lot of work to make it thoughtful, but also drive the conversation, do productive things with the student. And I encourage everyone to get an account and try it out. A journalist wanted to see how Eeyore handles tough questions. And so, it says, like, asked Eeyore, what are smarter, donkeys or horses? And Eeyore said, depends on the donkey, depends on the horse, which I think is the exact right answer. This over here is, whoops. Let me see if I can get to the next slide. Here's an example where a student can debate the AI, where they can take one side of the issue, the AI takes another. Here they're debating about whether the government should cancel student debt, and then the AI gives the student feedback on how they did. And the last speaker spoke about the future of academia. I think that the future of assessment is going to look a lot like this. You're going to have hands-on, activity-based, simulation-based engagements and then you can get a read on how the student performed there. What you're seeing here is our foray into writing. And what I'll just run what's happening here is a student's given an essay, and the AI Khanmigo is highlighting parts of the passage. And just as if you're working on with an editor on a Google Doc, it essentially acts like that. It highlights parts of it. You can start threads and decide how you want to edit and modify your paper. And what we're working on, and we intend to have by this coming back to school, so by this summer, is the entire workflow around assignment writing, which not only we think could save teachers a lot of time, empower a lot of students, but also undermine the whole cheating question. We're going to have the teacher work with Khanmigo to develop the assignment, develop the rubric, assign the assignment. Students are going to be in an interface like what you're seeing here to work on the assignment. And it won't just be get the feedback, but it could be brainstorm your topic, brainstorm your thesis statement, do the outlining. But the student's going to do the bulk of the work. AI is acting as a coach. And then when the student is ready to submit, they submit it. And then what the teacher is going to get is not just the final paper. When all of us were in school, that's all the teacher would get. And by the way, even then there was a lot of cheating. Who knows where that paper came from? But now Khanmigo doesn't have to just give the paper, it can give the entire process. Hey, here's just not just the paper, here's the entire transcript. We worked on it for 4 hours. Sal had a little bit of trouble coming up with a thesis statement. We eventually got there. We had a couple of issues with sourcing, but we got there, et cetera, et cetera. And it's, by the way, it's consistent with the work that Sal's been doing in the classroom. I feel confident this is Sal's work. If Sal goes to ChatGPT, or his older sister writes the paper, or he goes to one of these essay mills where you can get for $5 a page someone in Nigeria to write your essay for you, Khanmigo will say, I don't know where this essay came from. It just copied and pasted into this window. We spent no time on it. And by the way, it's completely inconsistent with what Sal's been doing in the classroom. So above and beyond supporting teachers and students better, we think it can actually undermine not just the ChatGPT cheating issue, but the cheating issue that frankly has always been there. This, just really quick, is, everything I've talked about is students, a little bit of teachers I've mentioned. But what you see here is a student working on Khan Academy. This is an American history question. Once again, if a student says, tell me the answer, it's not going to tell you the answer. It's there to be your tutor. But this is a teacher account. They can switch into teacher mode, which they just did. And now when they tell the answer, it acts as really a teacher's guide. And it can help the teacher get things like lesson plans and here it's doing a hook to make the Spanish-American War more interesting for the student. And what we're working on is, and this will be, we're probably going to launch a first version of it in about 2 months, is actually Khanmigo transcending Khan Academy. So this right over here is an example of Khanmigo working anywhere. This would be a teacher going to Wikipedia and saying, hey, I'd like a lesson plan based on this Wikipedia article. And it will then do that. And you can imagine teachers doing things like this. They can make assignments of certain articles. You could imagine students having Khanmigo alongside them, get tutoring on something they don't understand, having something rewritten in a way that's more understandable for them. Teachers assigning an article, but then Khanmigo being able to assess the student's understanding of that article. That article could be anywhere. It could be on the New York Times. It could be a research paper. And the whole time, parents and teachers have transparency on what their students are doing. We even imagine a world where let me stop sharing here. We even imagine a world where Khanmigo, acting as a co-pilot, can help from a safety point of view. I would love this for my own children, where you don't need to block all of YouTube, but you need to block certain videos on YouTube. And we know, obviously, generative AI, I think, can be intelligent enough to say this video isn't appropriate, or even this part of this video isn't appropriate. I'm not going to let you see that, and maybe notify me if it knows that my child is trying to go to an inappropriate site or do something like that. So I'll stop there with the presentation. I'm eager to get folks' questions, but there's a lot of hand wringing and fear about AI, and I have some worries too about in many other domains. But I'm very, very optimistic that if good people, and I think this is true in all domains, put more energy and resources into AI than the bad people are, that this is going to be a net positive. And the thing I got into this journey on Khan Academy, and this AI only accelerates it. At the end of the day, we can get as excited as we want about AI, but HI, human intelligence, human potential, what are these 8 billion minds capable of? That's always been the most fascinating thing. And if we can use AI to enable that, then I think it's a pretty exciting time to live. Thank you. And so I'm happy to take any questions, or if I don't know how much time we have.
Okay, so I'm going to be running the Q&A reminder. Please enter your questions through the app. because I'm going to be reading it, through the moderator view on the app, okay? Okay, so Sal, some questions came in early while you were talking. So here's the first one that came in from the audience. New tech often benefits the most affluent first. What do you think about how AI is going to turn out?
Yeah, I think if I look at the demographics we are already using Khanmigo with, I would call it mainstream school districts, Newark, New Jersey, Hobart, Indiana. But if you look at the people who are getting Khanmigo, and this is, I have to be, full disclosure, Khan Academy, our mission is free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. This is the first time we've had to charge for something because the compute costs, as many of y'all know, for a model like GPT-4 is not free. So we have to charge school districts and families right now to be able to access this. So when you imagine the families that are already going out there and paying $40 a year to access Khanmigo right now, it is probably disproportionately affluent families. That's not necessarily, or at least middle class, that's not necessarily the case in school districts, and that's why we work with school districts. The reason why, given our social mission, which is really about equity in the world, I'm still comfortable with that. I always give an analogy. There was a article that someone wrote 5 or 6 years ago about our free SAT prep that we partnered with the College Board. And they looked at the demographics of who was using it. And it was pretty actually representative of who's taking the SAT. But it was a slight overweight of more educated families, more affluent families were using it even disproportionately. And the writer made the argument like, oh, well, this was supposed to be here to drive equity, to level the playing field, but it's being used by more privileged folks. Maybe it's going the other way. And I said, no, you're looking at it the wrong way. You should not look at the proportion of folks who are using it. You should look at what happens when this exists or when this doesn't exist. Give an example of a library. I would guess that my local public library out here in Silicon Valley is disproportionately being used by affluent people who probably could afford books if they needed to. But if you took away that library, what's going to happen? My kids are still going to get books. All of the affluent people are still going to find a way for their kids to get books. But that maybe 1/3 of the local folks who are using the library who aren't from affluent populations, they're done. They're not going to have any resources. Same thing for a museum. You get rid of it, the affluent people will find another way to get cultural exposure. The non-affluent won't have it. So, what I argued back for the SAT stuff, if you take that stuff away, the affluent are, well, they're just going to go to Kaplan and Princeton Review or find some other tool. It's just going to be a little less convenient and maybe a little less effective. But all of the other students, the other 40% who isn't affluent, they're going to be completely lost. So I'd make the same argument with AI. And once again, you take Khanmigo away, the affluent can hire tutors. They've been doing this for centuries or millennia. And tutoring especially has been very, very hard to come by if you don't have the family resources or, a very awesome cousin in your family to help you out. And so what I'm excited by is, yes, there probably will be some of what you're describing, but I think where the activation energy of being able to get someone a tutor is going to come down dramatically. And obviously, when I say tutor, it's not going to be able to do everything that a human tutor will do, at least in the near term, but it will do some things that a human tutor can't do. It's always going to be around. It's going to be able to do some of these simulation type things. And what I'm excited about is, we have a dedicated instance of GPT-4 right now, and we're like, no one's using it in the middle of the night, which is exactly when kids in India and Bangladesh and Philippines and Vietnam, these are places where we have very active efforts for Khan Academy. Can we give this to them for free or close to free? And the costs are coming down pretty dramatically. So a little bit of that's going to happen, but I still don't think that's driving inequity. I think the arc is going to drive equity.
Okay, the next question is, online learning was an abysmal failure during COVID shutdowns, even for students who had adequate technology. What distinguishes online learning that works from what fails?
Yeah, it's fascinating. COVID, overall, COVID was a bad thing, but even its effect on online, I have very mixed feelings about it for the reasons just given. When the pandemic hit, we saw our traffic spike 3x, but then we saw school systems around the world start to implement their own pandemic distance, whatever you want to call it, learning. And I don't blame them. They didn't have time to prepare for this. But what they kind of did is they took their fairly didactic, less lecture-based stuff that they were already doing, which I've never been a fan of, because I would say, a lecture is, well, we could go, it should be much more interactive, much more personalized than lecture-based learning. But they took that and they just transplanted it to Zoom and they made it worse. Because now students are just staring at a screen. Many kids, the kids who probably needed it most, weren't even showing up. Very easy for kids to get distracted. In a classroom, you had to pretend to pay attention. Now with Zoom, you didn't even have to pretend to pay attention. And actually we started seeing Khan Academy usage taper down because frankly people got screen fatigue, and so we had 2 or 3 years where the whole system was just on kind of a spare tire trying to get by. What I encourage folks to think about is, and I will say, there's a lot of talk, and we've been talking a lot about the pandemic, the learning loss, and all of that. But there was another group of kids that far few people are talking about that went to pod learning, that started leveraging personalized learning tools more, that actually accelerated during that time. They were learning more than they would have otherwise. And we saw that at places like, this is a school that my kids go to, Khan Lab School out here in the Bay Area. We saw that at several other schools that were really leaning in. It wasn't about online learning or not online learning. It was about personalization or not personalization. So it's not about the modality, it's about the pedagogy. And to some degree for those folks and those families, the pandemic liberated them to not have to sit lockstep in traditional lectures, and they actually started, and that's why you see now actually all-time highs of people looking at alternative education options, whether it's homeschooling or pod schooling. And you have a lot of mainstream schools realizing that they have to figure out ways to address students' gaps. So, we started actually a online high school after the pandemic called Khan World School with Arizona State University. It's free to anyone in Arizona because there's a statewide charter, and we're trying to make it as low cost beyond that. But that's almost our response to showing, no, it's not that online is good or bad. It's just like anything. I mean, there's physical schools that are amazing. There's physical schools that are horrible. And you can imagine if you had to start a physical school in 2 weeks with technology that you just learned, or it's not going to be that good. And I think that's what happened during the pandemic.
Okay. The next question is, Khanmigo is great for democratizing private personalized tutoring. What are your thoughts on inspiring children to come to this platform instead of open AI platforms like ChatGPT, which just spit out the right answer?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, for older students, I think it is, if I'm talking about late high school and college, there are certain areas where ChatGPT could be interesting. And even on Khanmigo, actually for adults, if an adult has a Khanmigo account, we actually just have a chat with GPT-4 activity for folks who want to do that. Because we're like, hey, if you're a teacher, you're a parent, let's just make it one-stop shopping for them. So it's essentially, they don't have to also get like a Chat GPT Pro account and all of that. But one of the things I'm excited, I don't know about any of y'all's households, but in our household, there's a lot of horse trading around, hey, I'll let you play a little bit of Minecraft, but go do your Khan Academy. Or, you need to balance your productive time and your unproductive time when you're doing screen time. And when I finished the presentation, I was talking about Khanmigo always being around, essentially being embedded in the browser as a plugin or embedded in other sites. And I actually hope that in that world, Khanmigo can help regulate where the student is, and the parent can come up with much more sophisticated policies than we have in the past, where we can say, hey, yeah, for every 1% progress you get on Khan Academy, that opens up a half an hour of Minecraft for you, or Roblox, or YouTube, or whatever it might be. And even when you go there, it can help regulate your behavior. Even for us adults, it'd say, hey, Sal, weren't you working on researching real estate options for Khan Academy? Why are you stalking your friend from high school right now for the last half hour? Do you feel better about yourself? Maybe you want to go back to what you're working on. So yeah, I think that will play a role. And one of the projects that we're working on, I realized when I was even tutoring my cousins, as a tutor, I was helping explain concepts, but a lot of what I was doing was the meta. I was motivating them. I was calling up their mom and saying, hey, where are they? I know they have soccer practice, but she's struggling in math. I think this is a priority. We're trying to make Khanmigo more proactive. So it doesn't have to wait to be asked. It's doing, frankly, what I was doing, and even I now do as a father. Hey, come back. I'm going to message your mom if you don't do this, things like that. we think will make a dent.
Okay. The next question is, using AI to automatically figure out likely student misconceptions is an extremely powerful idea. What steps are you taking to move beyond the pilot stage to full readiness for broad usage?
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of turned into a little bit of a you know we are kind of in permanent pilot stage. I mean, I would say that's true of the underlying models as well. You know, these things are not perfect, and so I think it's very important for us to tell people like, look, first of all, the underlying models aren't perfect. We're trying to minimize hallucinations and math errors, and I think for anyone who uses Khanmigo, you'll be surprised by how much better it is than the base model. But it's still not perfect. Frankly, but even a human being, I sometimes hallucinate when people ask me a question. So, you know, but I think it's very important for people to have good context and understand what it can do and can't do. So I would call it a pilot, but it's ramping up pretty quickly. We have about 50,000 teachers and students in real classrooms using it right now. By this time next year, we're targeting 1 to 2 million just in the United States. And then we're also looking internationally in places like Brazil, India, other places. This critical thinking and being able to move, you know, students being able to explain their reasoning, we're super excited about. We think this is the future of practice. We think this is the future of assessment. Within the next year, we're going to have Khanmigo be able to, it's not ready yet to generate really high quality questions on the fly. We do have some activities where it can quiz you a bit, but our human written questions, and we have 70,000 items, are still much, much higher quality. But we do imagine a world in the not too far future where Khanmigo can administer these questions. And the power of having an AI administer already vetted high quality questions is, let's say it's a multiple choice question. The AI can say, hey, this is a multiple choice question, but before I show you the choices, why don't you articulate what you think is the answer? Okay, now I'll show you the choices. Which of these choices do you think is closest to your answer? Why or why not? Okay, you know, explain why you thought that. Well, okay, the choice actually isn't C, it's actually D. I'll give you a second chance, which I think will be a really, really powerful way. And then part of the power is the reporting back to the teachers and to the parents. Right now, Khanmigo or Khan Academy, when it reports to a teacher, it says the student is mastered at these skills, proficient at these skills, got this percentage right, this is how much time they spent. That's interesting. But to then add the other context of like, hey, here's a transcript of the student engaging in that material. Here is their confidence. Here's what the student told me when I asked why they missed the question. They think it was a careless mistake. This student thought that they just guessed it. That type of context has traditionally been missing, especially from ed tech. But frankly, even regular education, most teachers did not have the time, even with paper-based exams, to glean those types of insights. And I think that's all happening within the next year or two.
The next question is, you have been quoted as saying the entrepreneurial journey is difficult for everyone, and it was difficult for you. To encourage those who are just starting on that journey, could you share some of the not-so-great experiences that you got when you were talking to philanthropists?
You know, it's funny. I think sometimes there's stories you tell yourself, your inner narrative, but then sometimes there's things you can't help but do. When my first stint out in Silicon Valley, my first job was at Oracle, and you know, just a small world. My first boss was Thomas Kurian, who now runs Google Cloud and all of that. And I remember I was at Oracle about a year, then I started doing some startups out here in San Francisco, and it was going great. NASDAQ collapses. You know, we all remember that day, or many of those of us who are older remember that day. And I remember, and then you know, it was kind of, and then I remember the layoffs and all of that. And I was like, you know, I'm not cut out for entrepreneurship. And I wasn't the founder of the startup. I was the chief of staff to the founders, and I was the CTO. But I was like, this was horrible. This was like gut wrenching. I'm going to go to business school and figure out something else to do. I discover I like finance. I find myself at a hedge fund. And even though I kept telling myself I couldn't handle these riskier, smaller, even the hedge fund I ended up working for was like, I was the first employee. My boss was the founder of the hedge fund. But I somehow convinced myself that this wasn't entrepreneurship. And then when Nadia needed help and I started working with her, I kept telling myself, no, this is not a startup. This is not some type of business. And you can imagine all my business school friends, when they knew I had this crazy project, were like, what are you doing? What's the monetization? I'm like, no, no, don't talk about that. This is my project with my cousins. It is not a business. And it isn't, I mean, it still isn't really a business, but it's not even a startup. So I was always protecting it emotionally that way, because I always told myself, I'm not an entrepreneur. I can't handle it. And but I kept working on Khan Academy, and by 5 years into that, in 2009, I frankly had trouble focusing on my day job, and that's when I took the plunge. And I think anytime you take any type of an entrepreneurial leap, for profit or nonprofit, you do have to have a little bit of delusional optimism. I was getting letters from folks all over the world saying how it helped them and helped their kids. I was like, well, if it's helping 100,000 today, it could help 100 million one day. It could help 1 billion one day. That was my delusional optimism, and it was grounded in something. But and I wanted to set up as a nonprofit. There were venture capitalists out. I moved out to Silicon Valley by that point, who were saying, "Hey, we'll write a check right now. We'll do a freemium thing." Meeting one was always great. Meeting two, not that they were saying anything wrong, but it didn't feel right. I thought about all these letters, and I thought most of those people would not benefit from this if it was a freemium model. So I set up as a nonprofit, but very quickly I was getting a ton of rejections. And you can imagine 2009, I gave up a pretty good job. My first child had just been born. My wife was a fellow in rheumatology, so she was making a little bit of money, but she's making, like, a resident salary, which you can imagine in Silicon Valley, we were still digging into our savings, about $5,000 or $6,000 a month, and that savings was to buy a house, which was quickly becoming not a down payment. You fast forward about 7 or 8 months into that, and you're like, what am I doing? And there was no pattern for that. People in Silicon Valley understand, oh, you quit your job to do a startup, and it's risky, but there's a lot of upside. But here's this, he's making YouTube videos, it's a nonprofit, he's pitching to these philanthropists. Yeah, there was a lot of questioning what I was doing, even myself, wasn't sleeping so well, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that was a very, very hard time. And, I kept the most naive approach. I just kept working on it, and eventually folks noticed.
Sal, we've run out of time, so although there were many other questions in here, we'd have to stop. But we really wanted to thank you for being with us today, and for sharing with us what you're doing, and also being receptive to our audience questions. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.